welcome back your HardTech moderator and technology columnist to the CBC Radio, Manjula Selvarajah.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to our final panel of the conference, Hardware Breakthroughs Powering Our Products of Tomorrow. The Hardware Catalyst Initiative was born out of a growing demand for hardware and semiconductor technologies for everything from electric vehicles to agri-tech equipment. Let's meet three of the Hardware Catalyst founders now. Rachel Bartholomew is founder and CEO of High IV Health. Abdullah Berth is the CEO and co-founder of Low Power Futures, and Dr. Joseph Ma is the CEO of Bionic Eye. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Now, before we sit down for our discussion, let's show the audience some brief videos about your products.
1 in 3 women are dealing with pelvic health disease, but condition management after diagnosis is almost non-existent. Many of these women are living with permanent pain and other severe symptoms affecting their work, family, and intimate lives. The only options women have today are joining a year-long waitlist for pelvic floor therapy or attempting to use a therapy device designed 90 years ago, still the only product available. How can more patients get access to high-quality pelvic floor aftercare? And how can therapists be actively involved in their patients' care after they leave the clinic? We've created High IV for the millions of women who deserve a better quality of life after pelvic disease diagnosis. Our new rehabilitation system is used from the comfort and privacy of a woman's own home, leveraging technology to connect them to their therapist in real time. High IV is a Bluetooth-connected device with a combination of 3 components for at-home use. A multi-therapy wand that uses 3 recognized rehab therapies, biosensors that track and securely communicate the patient's therapy data, and a mobile application where patients can track their progress, input subjective data on their mental and physical status, and privately interact in real time with their therapist throughout their treatment. The High IV clinical software portal provides real-time remote patient monitoring information, alerting the therapist to changes so they can take action as needed. This may involve changing the treatment protocol for the patient or actually having a secure live session where the therapist controls the device remotely to optimize the treatment experience for the patient at home. Together, the High IV connected wand and clinical software enables pelvic health therapists to engage more actively with their patients beyond the walls of their clinic. So therapists can improve patient outcomes, serve more patients, and extend their geographic reach. High IV makes safe, effective, and comfortable pelvic health treatment more accessible to women everywhere.
Despite the unprecedented pace in COVID-19 management, key factors such as inadequate vaccination rates, new resistant variants, and the need for boosters signal that we will live in a COVID-19 world for years to come. In a COVID-19 endemic future, preventing transmission remains the top priority. As we restart social engagements, 3 of the most critical initiatives demonstrated to be effective are providing excess ventilation, effective surveillance testing, and efficient contact tracing. However, existing solutions in these 3 areas are extremely expensive and difficult to execute. The world needs a more effective, affordable, and efficient solution to stop the spread of COVID-19. That's why we've developed the Bionic Eye UVC Hyperflow Augmented Viral Surveillance Air Sterilizer, a patent-pending portable modular device that combines cutting-edge UVC Hyperflow plus HEPA FlowGuard technology, together with environmental PCR testing to provide solutions in 3 core areas. Dramatically accelerating ventilation by 10 times with a sterilized airflow to stop viral aerosol transmission for a safer work environment. Decreasing costs for surveillance testing by at least 20 times, and providing integrated digital contact tracing to seamlessly alert individuals at risk for infection. With support from the Canadian Medical Association and NSERC, Bionic Eye was engineered from the ground up to proactively prevent, monitor, and trace the transmission of COVID-19 in any environment, from surgical clinics to elite pro athlete gyms to corporate offices and schools, all without the need for frequent, painful nasal swab testing. Our mission is to prevent, track, and ultimately predict the spread of COVID-19, to create a cleaner, safer environment for all medical facilities, elite performers, businesses, and schools. Give our loved ones, teachers, and community peace of mind with the Bionic Eye UVC Hyperflow Augmented Viral Surveillance Air Sterilizer, powered by HEPA FlowGuard technology.
Low Power Futures specializes in low-power hardware silicon, IP, and firmware for Internet of Things devices. Our mission is to provide the most innovative IPs to our customers to allow them to build ultra-low power, secure, highly integrated, and AI-enabled products for IoT. The number of connected IoT devices will reach 1 trillion units by the year 2035. With more than 90% expected to be low-power and ultra-low-power IoT devices, making power consumption the #1 challenge for IoT. Other constraints facing the next trillion IoT modules are miniaturization, security, and AI support. Low Power Futures has built several IP platforms to specifically address those needs. The low power consumption of our design allows battery-powered products like wearables to last longer. The area optimization allows them to be smaller and cheaper. We also provide small area, low power security, and built-in AI inference capability for small embedded devices. In contrast to the one-size-fits-all approach used in today's IoT products, our IP platform can be customized for different markets, leading to smaller and more power-efficient products. We are currently validating our prototype in the HCI state-of-the-art lab. We've engaged with several semiconductor companies to work on licensing deals. We are interested in partnership and investments to help us commercialize and grow our company. Low Power Futures is a team of experienced and passionate engineers who enjoy working on challenging problems. Please contact us for more information on our products and partnership opportunities.
Okay, there's a lot of exciting things to unpack there, so let's get into it. So let me start you off by the moment that this idea came to you. Tell us about that light bulb moment, the moment when you realized that this was the problem you wanted to solve. I'll start with you, Joseph. I think you're still muted.
Me now?
Yeah, now I can hear you. Go ahead.
Last March, as happened this year, they shut us down for 3 months, all non-emergent surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, we were working on an electronic ocular implant. Of course, no surgery, no implant. And it was obvious that there would be a larger, more immediate problems to address. And the issue was that during surgery, we were worried about aerosolizing virus and therefore transmitting patients and other doctors. Since then, it's been clear that what I do, the type of surgery we do, it's less at risk for that. However, the idea that COVID is actually more of an airborne, aerosolized disease as opposed to droplet disease has also become obvious, so that it becomes a more, the product that we're working on has a larger utility, more ubiquitous utility with more impact potentially on a larger scale. As you all know, we're coming out of this third wave, but there's most likely going to be a fourth wave. My partner is in Malaysia. He just recently went to Indonesia. They just shut down Malaysia last month. So around the world, this is going to be a problem for quite some time. And so as we socialize, we hope to be able to do something to prevent, monitor, and potentially help contact trace during the pandemic and also after the pandemic.
Thank you, Joseph. Rachel?
Yeah, so I am a two-time entrepreneur. I had a company before this and innovator through and through. I was working with Wilfrid Laurier University's incubator and running that. And I left that after a year. 2 weeks later, I got a cancer diagnosis. And so I spent a lot of time on bed rest. And if any of you have ever went through surgery, your brain is working full throttle, but your body is kind of disconnected. And I used that time to start connecting with women in Facebook groups and across different forums where they're sharing their cancer experiences, and realized that we were all kind of in store for a really terrible time with our aftercare. And as an innovator, I said, okay, let's dive further into this problem. Realized that the solutions hadn't been upgraded for 100 years. So I was like, okay, women deserve better than this, and somebody's got to pull their socks up and do some work on this. And so while on bed rest, I dove into the problem further and came up with a solution that I thought I could actually use. And then when I started my radiation therapy, I tested my hypothesis on the solution with the radiation oncologists, my oncologists that were treating me, and got the medical validation that I needed on the product and the problem.
And I should ask Rachel, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I think anyone who deals with cancer, I think it's, we look back at our treatment, we'll probably say, why did we do this once, technology catches up? And I think you deal more with the after problems with the treatment than you do the actual dealing with cancer itself. So I'm in my 5-year kind of check-in every 6 months. So doing good so far.
I'm really glad to hear that. Abdullahi?
For me, it was years of academia and industry experience that finally led to that spark. While completing my PhD, I knew power consumption was critical for the Internet of Things. But the real spark came about 4 years ago when I was working at a startup to build an IoT chip from different IPs. Each time we had a conversation with an IP provider, we would notice that they were missing several other important pieces. And that would lead us to contact another IP provider for those missing pieces, only for it to tell us that they only had part of it and that we'll need to carry on with the search. And that went on for a while. That was really the light bulb or lightning. I knew something had to change. I realized that an IP platform tailored to an IoT chip integrator need would significantly increase productivity. Less IP vendor to engage with, a reduced time to market, and as a result, a gain in market share. So Manjula, the solution to the problem was very clear.
It's fascinating that all of your ideas came from being immersed in certain environments and experiences. So let's talk about the journey that you're on now. What are the most pressing challenges you've encountered building both your product and the company? Abdullahi, I'll get you to weigh in on that, and then go to Joseph and Rachel.
Yeah, well, that's easy. It's been access to funding. The cycle in the semiconductor industry is long, and it takes more time to build a standard compliant prototype. And having a prototype unlock initial conversation with customers. But what is really often overlooked in many discussions is the customer perspective. They want you as a startup to have the resources required to support them integrate your innovative design. That is really important from their perspective. Yeah. And in addition to that, getting access to a lab was really challenging for us. At the time, we had a prototype and we wanted to test it. So we bought a few equipment online, but we quickly reached the limit of what was possible with those equipment. Fortunately, we were selected to participate in the second cohort of the Hardware Catalyst Initiative, and that gave us access to the lab. However, we are still looking for funding to get to the next level of commercialization.
Of course. Rachel.
Yeah, so there's been a couple. So we actually started our company right at the height of the pandemic. So we incorporated in February 2020. So we're still a relatively new company, but already, none of my team members have really met face-to-face or in person. So creating a culture is definitely a very tough thing, especially during the pandemic. Yeah. And, really trying to connect with people when you've never met in person. I think the other thing is hardware products during the pandemic is also extremely challenging. So a lot of the times we're doing handoffs of sensors and boards in parking lots so that people can take it home and then do that work from home, with a lot of the labs and the innovation spaces closed down because of COVID. So that's been a little bit of our challenges. I think we've also overcome a lot of that in terms of funding. So we actually just raised a round, and we're going to be announcing it throughout the pandemic as well. So that has been definitely interesting, not going in and doing face-to-face meetings with investors and long-term. And growing and interviewing people all electronically has been very interesting. And then just finding resources that you need to scale, whether it's financial, going through your financials and having to zoom in on that tiny Excel spreadsheet with a mentor, all the way to more electronic based and manufacturing based help as well. So you just adapt as the times change, and we know that virtual is going to be something that we're going to be adopting now a lot wider after COVID as well. So you just kind of figure it out as you go.
As you go. By the way, congratulations on the funding. That's always
Thank
lovely
you.
news. Lovely news. Joseph?
I would agree. Definitely funding and certainly getting the team together is difficult, and coordinating all that. There was a point when we had our hardware, our software teams integrated, and they could never meet. So it was very difficult to be able to do that. The other thing, of course, at the stage we're at right now is really sourcing a reliable and cost-effective supply chain, and trying to scale up some manufacturing. Originally I had a manufacturing partner. We did some great work, but the product and process was too expensive. Found a different one, and then there's issues with where to source components, and of course things are happening around the world real time. So then there are always these unpredictable things that have happened, and I'm sure everyone who's been working in the hardware space, the pandemic, has probably experienced the same sort of thing. And it's sort of these things that you took for granted, 2-3 years ago. They're not that easy to do anymore.
And I think when you feel like you're in the middle of something that's really accelerated and you really want to go ahead, any kind of supply, demand, whatever problems that exist of that kind really hit you harder, I would imagine.
Well, you come up with these projections of when you think you'll get something done, and then invariably there's like X, Y, and Z that you didn't even factor in. And with COVID, it's like times 10, right?
Yes.
You thought that you had a great, partner to be able to do this, and then because of whatever, let's say they had to shut down the shop or whatever, because of COVID, because of location, because of transport costs, and if you're getting anything offshore, have dramatically increased. We have some stuff coming from Taiwan, dramatic. So it's, and then of course, Taiwan has their own issues now, and then there's a vaccination around the world. So, like I said, one of our partners is in Malaysia, and they just shut down 3 weeks ago, and it's sort of something that we're gonna have to deal with moving forward, and it dramatically changed the landscape of how hardware, I think, is gonna be designed and built and sourced, I think.
It's interesting, Joseph. I've just as part of my, work as a journalist, I interview early stage founders, and I do find that it's interesting that the three things that you've all stated are things that I keep hearing again and again. Especially the funding portion is something that I hear very often. I should add that I want to give people time for questions, because we had a whole sort of fleet of questions come in on the last panel that I did, and we didn't get to all of them. So if you have questions for our incredible guest here, please put them up in the chat box, and we'll make sure I'll make sure that I put them to our panel. Let's talk about the length of commercialization in Canada, since we have investors, policymakers, other startups that are in the audience today. Can you give me a sense of what it looks like? I want you to be really frank. And what are some of the lessons that you've learned kind of walking through that process? Perhaps I'll start with you, Rachel.
Where do I begin? I mean, I'm creating a medical device that is heavily regulated in a very stigmatized world. So commercialization is something that keeps me up at night, to say the least. I think one of the biggest challenges for us was making the decision and making the right decision on, do we go ahead with a consumer-based product that's a wellness device that doesn't have regulatory approvals, it doesn't have medical oversight, versus do we go the pathway of pulling up our socks and, you know, getting the clinical evidence, going through clinical trials, going to the regulators and working through a time where, you know, health tech is crazy. I mean, FDA is swamped with COVID related things. You know, a lot of the clinical trials can't move forward right now because, you know, COVID has taken precedent. And so making that decision was extremely tough for me. We did end up going the medical route for many different reasons, but, you know, going through and learning, what does a clinical trial entail when you've never done it before? What does regulation in a highly regulated product from an ISO consideration all the way to FDA versus Health Canada, what does that look like? Most of my team has never been in the medical industry before, so this is something that we had to learn on the fly. And those commercialization processes are very long. We've broken a lot of those barriers ourselves, pushing that status quo and saying, we're not going to make it long. We're going to keep pushing and pushing and seeing what we can get done in the shortest period of time, but most effectively. And that just required a lot of outside help, a lot of sleepless nights, talking with people, looking at every aspect of strategy and figuring out what works best for us and why we wanted to choose that pathway. But in the end, I think it really proves that you don't need to be in the medical field or any field in any industry to go out and learn it and figure it out on your own. You may make a couple mistakes along the way, but you'll make mistakes regardless. That's just part of being a startup company.
Thank you. Abdullah?
Commercialization when it comes to IP and the chip industry is a little bit challenging. It's challenging in the sense that having an IP, only the IP is not usually enough for some customer to go for integration. So they really want you to have the right resources to support them integrate the product. And one of the things that also comes often is proving your solution in silicon. So have a prototype that's proven on silicon that gives customers more faith when it comes to integrating the product, because they see from their perspective it's a risk management as well. So that's why initiative like the HCI is really helpful in the sense that it helps us validate our solution on an FPGA, which is not a chip, but it's still a prototype, and help us convince or engage with customer from that perspective.
And I should explain in case anyone, I think we all, most of us know what the HCI is, but it's the Hardware Catalyst Initiative. And we're going to get into that in about a minute. Joseph, I'd love you to talk about your experience with commercialization as well.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, when you deal with something hardware, even something that's you'd think was relatively simple, takes feels like 10 times longer. Yeah. You know, because each time you iterate, unlike software, each time you iterate something, you got to go and then you get the supplies, you got to change something. It just takes so much longer. And then when you need to get something certified and it's certified and you're testing it out and you're doing a clinical trial, for instance, then something you find that you want to implement, you wouldn't be able to do until the next time around. So everything takes much longer than I guess if you had maybe more experience in it. But as a first-time founder, you find that there's so many more things out there that are involved in each iteration, and of course that affects funding, because there's so much more cost associated with each aspect. And then you really have to plan things in advance, and then you plan for these things that you know you won't know. And you have to have that little, you have to have all that prepared. And I think that's even more important when you do something that is going to be medically certified, you know. And that's the first thing that we were working on, which we're still pursuing, is the implant. And for instance, one of the things that we were, the next step was animal trials. And that would involve a lab, and you'd have to physically be there. And of course, because of COVID, that's dramatically changed sort of the path and the timing of what we wanted to do there. When it comes to our current device, it's really finding a reliable supply chain if we're going to scale up, when we scale up, that they can actually deliver when we say we need it, you know, because lining all these things up is, I mean, there's a whole operational component to it, aside from just getting to the commercialization point. That,
Yeah,
you know, it's a completely, you know, it's so much more involved than you would have thought. We would.
Of course. It's interesting because, you know, the picture you're painting is like, the two words that come to mind is, yes, you have to be nimble, but you have to be incredibly patient. And to a certain degree, you know, the business skill of really planning becomes so important. So you've laid out a couple of different challenges, the three of you have. You're part of the Hardware Catalyst Initiative. Talk to me about whether it's from your experience or sort of what you've seen in the program, because you build, I mean, one of the things that are great about programs like this is you build a network. Talk to me about what founders can get out of a program like the Hardware Catalyst Initiative. Joseph, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many aspects to running a business and building a company that you can always use an extra hand or two or 10, you know. And so the HCI has been able to help in many ways to help perform some of these tasks that otherwise we'd assign to other members of our team. And whether it's introducing to local partners, following up, liaising with the government, warm introductions, funding, for instance, connections for that. So all these things are, you can always use the both not only the manpower, but also the advice and experience of someone who's done it before. So hopefully you won't be following, you'll be able to avoid some of those mistakes that they've learned from and learn from them.
Amazing. So you've talked about manpower, you've talked about connections. Abdullah, I know you spoke earlier about validation around the length of commercialization and how, you know, the Hardware Catalyst Initiative helped you with that. But can you get into a few more things that the program has helped you with, or other founders?
Yeah, it's as I mentioned, yeah, access to the lab itself and electronic design automation tool, that's been invaluable to us, because it's saved us a lot of money that we don't have as a startup to spend. And the lab is a state of the art, and I think it's out of reach for many startup like mine. So that's been really a game changer for us. Another important benefit that we got from the program is mentorship. I've had the privilege to work with Ravi Gananathan since joining the program, and his knowledge in the industry has been extremely helpful. And I think you would agree with me that tech founders in general are very passionate about what they do, and we really enjoy talking about it. So having the opportunity to discuss the issues that we're facing with somebody who knows the field, that's just a gift.
Of course. And I think that's the stuff that is so subtle that sometimes you don't know is going on in these sort of groupings, right? I'm so glad you brought that up. Rachel, you get the last word on that. What can founders get out of a program like the HCI?
I mean, I think, you know, both of the other panelists have really highlighted it, including Ravi. So shout out to Ravi. I know he's probably here. He's also our mentor. I look at him as an extension of our team. He helps us stay on track. He keeps us accountable. He's always hustling for resources. We're actually just getting access to the lab for the first time on this coming Friday. So really getting access to equipment, resources, and things that you would have never gotten access to unless you were part of a university in, you know, your PhD, or down in the States where they have a lot more funding available for bigger labs. And we had actually gotten lab space in New York, a 7-story building of all places, a big maker space, but we weren't able to go there because of COVID. So, you know, HCI has provided something that you don't really get access to here in Canada. There's little maker spaces, or you got to go to a manufacturer or find someone who has maybe bits and pieces of the equipment that you do need. So that's been the biggest benefit with us with HCI.
So I'd very quickly like to get a sense of where each of you are at with your product and your company. So perhaps if you can take a minute to give, because I know that I'm going to leave this and people are going to be like, well, I want to know, Dr. Mar, like where does the solution stand, or Rachel, is it out there? So let's start with the and you don't have to obviously disclose anything that should remain confidential, but I'm curious. I'm sure the audience is curious. Joseph, let's start with you. Where's the company at, and where's the product at?
Right now, we've over the past 3 months, it just happened right before this third wave. We started testing our device, the environmental surveillance aspect of it. It's a sensitivity using the methods that we've, our proprietary methods for doing that, and in the clinic as well as in operating room. And so that's the first, part of it. The second part is, while we've had our first run of sort of devices that we're testing, we are simultaneously trying to figure out, the actual scale-up production run, how to produce those devices, because we would have to do it at the cost is, we have to lower the cost, we have to increase the volume with space, all those things that are involved in really scaling, because we've really worked on this for about a year now, and we've evolved. This is our 5th iteration. We've reached a really pretty good product market fit. And so the idea is the challenge of actually working with shops, finding suppliers, figuring out how to do, because getting even 50 or so is not that difficult. But if you want to really scale it up to getting 100 or 1,000, then everything changes. The scale of it changes it dramatically.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Rachel.
Yeah, so we are in benchtop testing of each of our individual therapies, both for feasibility as well as safety. And we're going and heading into all of the training necessary for the ISO requirements. We're also in the process of going through a manufacturing assessment. So we were lucky enough to find an amazing partner in Canada that we can do our manufacturing with, who's been helping us and holding our hand throughout the process. And we're getting ready for a clinical trial to start in January. I also saw a question come in terms of the FDA filing. So yes, we're pursuing a 510K with the FDA in conjunction with Health Canada. So hopefully going to both, just because we've had such a large demand of clinicians and customers coming equally from Canada as well as the US. So trying to pursue both markets at once with a goal of getting to market early next year.
Thank you. And that question, by the way, was from Tom Matai at Street Space Corp. Tom, thank you for that question. Abdullah, you get the last word on this.
We are currently validating our solution in the lab. So we have a prototype that's on an FPGA. You could think of an FPGA as a prototyping platform that could be erased. You make changes, you could erase. It's like a chip, but you could erase it and do a lot of experiments. So we are at that stage. We're doing that at the system level, and at the same time, we've started to engage with customers to get some feedback on our product. And right now, we're also establishing a plan for a prototype test chip to prove our solution on silicon.
Amazing. I can't wait to hear more about that, and also what the other two panelists are doing as well. Now, we're going to be taking questions from the audience, as I mentioned. Please take some time. You can type the question out. We've already got a couple of them coming in, which I'll put to everyone. But before we get to the questions, I want to have a sort of a fun, quick fire round with our panel here. So very quickly, in sort of 10 to 20 seconds, answer these questions. Abdullah, I'll be starting with you, then it'll be Rachel, and then it'll be Joseph. So question number 1, best startup book you've read?
The Man Behind the Microchip by Leslie Berlin. It's the story of Robert Noyce, co-founder of Fairchild Semiconductor and Intel.
Great pick. Rachel?
Ooh, the Challenger sale. For all those people who don't like sales, get it.
Oh, I haven't heard that one. Okay, that's a great choice. Joseph.
Innovation Stack by Jim McKelvey, just about how Square squared off with Amazon, you know, and just the whole idea of just kind of focusing on your customer and what you're trying to do there, and don't worry too much about the rest.
Thank you. The next one, the one thing every founder needs in his or her, I guess, briefcase. I don't even know if people even carry those anymore, or smartphone, or office. Abdullah, we'll start with you again.
I would say something that reminds you why you are doing what you do. So for me, I have a quote on my screensaver from a famous soccer player, Pele. You probably know him.
Yes.
Yeah. And he says success is no accident. It's hard work, perseverance, learning, studying, sacrifice, and most of all, love of what you do or learning to do. So keeps me motivated.
Well, any session where you read a quote from Pele is already a successful panel. So there you go. Rachel?
All right, it's a tough call between remote, like wireless ear pods so you can walk around, because I know we all sit way too long in front of Zoom. So if you can get up and get motoring, the better. Or snacks. Also good to keep snacks in hand very close at all times.
By the way, on that wireless front, I do have a recommendation for you. I'll message you after about that.
Okay.
I have a great product. This one isn't one, but there's a product that I can recommend to you. Joseph.
I'd say something to make you smile and feel grateful in the moment, because there's always going to be times when and then you have this meeting or something, you got to be positive, you got to look positive. So for me, it's a photo of my kids doing something absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. No, I'm so glad you brought that up, because
no, it's true. Because you come in and you have to be positive, and then something comes in and you're, oh crap, and then you're like, okay, how do I change my mood? you know?
And the journey of that founder, it is this emotional, like incredible highs and incredible lows, and you can have them within sort of 3 hours in a day. So I'm so glad you brought that up.
You got to kind of level yourself, you know.
Yeah,
something to ground yourself.
So on that note, in 20 seconds or less, I'd love to hear your favorite moment in the journey so far. Abdullah?
That's the validation in the lab. When we got into the lab and started testing and saw that on the RF signal analyzer, that the signal that we were sending were accurate, that felt really great. So it confirmed that the math and the physics work as they usually do. So yeah, that was fantastic.
I'm feeling the happiness out of that right now. Rachel.
Oh my gosh, where do I begin? I think we have, so just before this, we connect with our team every Wednesday and do fun online games. So I think just spending that time not working and connecting with the team is a big one. Talking with customers call me and chat about, pelvic floor things all the time. I love that. And I'm meeting with Chris Hadfield next week. So Canadian Idol, I'm a little over the moon about that. So I think that'll probably become my favorite moment.
Good luck with that.
Thank you.
And Joseph.
I would say learning when you learn something that in retrospect seems obvious, but wasn't at the time. And then you feel like that you can actually apply it. And then it could be something like really small, really ridiculous, but you're like, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, now I can use this, and it comes to me, I feel like sometimes at the most unexpected times. Like, oh, well, that was obvious, but then you can apply it to other things, other parts of your life, and
yeah,
kind of
I like that too.
More intangible thing, but yeah.
No,
that's for me, what's most interesting about it is it's all a learning experience you're just forced into it, pretty much. Everything is new, everything's different, everything's unexpected. So in that, you'll find something always, like every day almost.
That's a great note. Let's get into questions now. This is to any of you. Brianna Ireland has a question. How has the Canadian supply chain impacted your ability to grow and scale a hardware company and develop your product? What are the pros and cons of the Canadian supply chain? Who would like to start off on that?
I'd say it's go ahead, Rachel.
No, go for it.
I would say it's tough because for so many years, a lot of the manufacturing, a lot of stuff has left, Canada, and a lot of the stuff that we need is actually not here, and especially the more subspecialized sort of things. One of the things we needed was a liquid crystal manufacturer at some point in time that could do something very miniaturized for our implant. And, it's just, we don't have the capacity to manufacture a lot of these things. Even in the States, like a lot of that stuff is moved offshore. And so trying to get things done here that you can do offshore costs maybe like 3 to 4 times more, and the quality may not be as good. And so it's okay for doing prototypes, but when you really want to scale, I think you got to get someone over there or have a team member over there to be able to get those components that you can't get done easily here. It's a system issue. It's not really something that I think you can fix or change, and it's just the way our economies are built. We're no longer like the manufacturing. So I think that to me is probably one of the hardest things.
Now I have a couple more questions, but would any of you like to weigh in on that, Rachel?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Canada is not known for its electronics, so you're going to have to bring in a lot of that if that's what you're, going down that pathway. But at the same time, I've had some great experiences with Canadian manufacturers, and even though the cost is more, which you are going to look for, my biggest tip on that is build out a criteria that really allows you to see, do they have potential to scale? Do they have negotiating power? There are quite a few of them in Canada that can, and the stigma associated with, especially in medical products, and Brianna, I know you personally, so, with medical products, there's a lot of stigma associated with stuff that comes from overseas. So if you can have that made in the US or made in Canada stamp, that stigma around quality is drastically, changed and improved. So everything comes with its pros and cons, and it also comes at, do you want to potentially put your IP at risk as well, going overseas? So those are all things that I know are changing, and it's just a matter of the landscape, a lot of what Joseph had already kind of highlighted.
And Abdullah, you can weigh in on that, but I also have another question that's actually being directed to you. So I'm going to put that question to you. How has consumer engagement strategies shifted for your company? And that's from Sarah Miraban. Apologies if I mispronounced that.
It's the same thing as the other question. We don't sell directly to customers, so we operate business to business. So, and in terms of customer base, we're looking really at the world. Really, we have the customers that we're engaging with are mostly in the US and some in Europe. So, we do not engage directly with the end. The end customers. Yeah. So from that perspective, I would say that it hasn't really impacted us.
He'll be ready to talk about that, Sarah. He'll be ready to talk about that next year. Is that right, or the year after? At some point, right? Engaging with whoever you need to engage with, perhaps partners. In order to get that done. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. There's so much I learned from that. There's apparently a question asking for my favorite book from the audience. It's a little bit of a revelation, but it's actually the Leonardo da Vinci book by Walter Isaacson. But there is it's fantastic. But there's a family joke about that book because I think I've been reading it for something like 2 years or whatever. The joke is that he writes books faster than I read them. So, but I
recently read the Doudna book. Have you read the Doudna book?
No, I have to finish
this. So that's very timely because that talks about coronavirus. And the interesting thing is the title, there's a corona around Doudna. That's actually what you got injected with the vaccine. That's actually the spike protein, RNA, on the corona.
Well, the thing is I wanted to pick up that book.
You need to pick it up. I read the Jobs one and I just finished the Doudna one maybe a couple months ago. Nice. And he's a great writer. Well,
I got to finish this Da Vinci one.
The Einstein one too. Have you get the Einstein one, the Benjamin Franklin even, right? I think he's got the whole. So I actually bought the whole set. So for sure, he's a great writer.
And I'll say there are things that I think you can learn from there. First of all, about writing, about journalism, but also the journeys of an incredibly creative force. So anyway, thank you for asking that. I'm so glad you asked, and also ashamed that I haven't finished it in whatever 2 years. Thank you so much. This was such a great discussion. Rachel, Abdullah, Joseph, thank you for being so frank about where things are. Good luck with your journey. Now that concludes our third and final panel discussion of the HardTech conference.